Okay, let's dive into the incredible, and let's be honest, the often tragically misunderstood story of a true musical icon. Her voice was absolutely massive, but it was almost completely silenced by a really cruel myth. Cass Elliot, you know the voice. She was the powerhouse vocalist, the absolute breakout star of the Mamas and the Papas. But behind all that talent was a pretty tragic story of unrequited love, professional humiliation, and this mean-spirited myth that has somehow stuck around for decades. So today, we're going to separate the fact from the fiction and reveal the real person behind that legendary voice. It's really fascinating and so sad how this one cruel myth has totally overshadowed a life of just immense talent and profound struggle. I mean, look at this. The lie about the sandwich was just a final vicious smear that played on the one battle she fought her entire life. The reality is so much more heartbreaking, and it's a story we really need to set straight. To really understand the legend, we've got to go back to the beginning, to a young woman named Ellen Cohen. She had this radiant personality and a voice that was just destined for greatness, but she also carried some serious demons from a very young age. So from a young age, Ellen Cohen had this undeniable talent. In high school, she discovered she loved theater, and that's where she found the confidence to perform. She even created this whole new persona, Cass Elliot, to go chase her dream. But as she pursued a career in the arts, she was constantly, and I mean constantly, battling the stigma around her weight. Yeah, her path to stardom wasn't easy. In fact, she was told over and over again that she just didn't have the right look. And this prejudice came directly from the man who would eventually build an entire band around her. So this was the official line from the band leader, John Phillips, for keeping Cass out of his folk group, The New Journeymen. It was this, technical, musical excuse that sounded plausible enough to everybody on the outside. But behind closed doors, the real reason was just a brutal judgment about how she looked. Phillips was extremely critical of her weight, a prejudice she would have to face her entire career. I mean, this was an era that celebrated super thin women, and Cass felt like she didn't stand a chance. This timeline really lays out Cass's painful journey to get into the Papas. So after her first band with Denny Doherty, the Mugwumps split up. Denny joined John and Michelle Phillips's new band. Now Cass, who was deeply in love with Denny, followed them for a year, just enduring their cruel treatment and constant rejection. But then, in 1965, the new band was totally broke, and they turned to her for help. She saw her chance and basically gave them an offer they couldn't refuse. Let me in the band, or you can sleep on the streets. And just like that, the Mamas and the Papas were born. They became absolute superstars with hits like California Dreaming. But for Cass, all that success was tainted with personal mockery and just deep, deep heartbreak. And get this, the cruelty was literally embedded in their music. In their hit song, Creek Alley, they included the line, "No one's getting fat except Mama Cass." That lyric, a public mockery from the man she loved and her other bandmates, it just struck a chord with fans. And that insulting nickname, Mama Cass, stuck with her for life. At the very core of the band's dynamic was this just impossible, heartbreaking situation. Cass had joined the band for Denny, but he was secretly involved with Michelle, who was married to John. It was just this tangled web of betrayal that left Cass feeling completely alone. You can just feel her devastation. She confronted Michelle, asking, "You can have any man in the world. Why take the one I love?" When Denny finally confessed the affair, she was absolutely crestfallen but still held out hope. In fact, decades later, Denny revealed that Cass had actually proposed to him one night, but he was just too intoxicated to answer. So after leaving the Mamas and the Papas with a broken heart, she launched a solo career. She landed this massive six-figure deal in Las Vegas. But the pressure to conform to an impossible body standard led her to take a really dangerous gamble with her health. To get ready for her huge solo debut in Vegas, Cass went on this extreme diet, losing a third of her body weight. She fasted 4 days a week for 7 months straight and dropped over 100 pounds. But this extreme diet didn't just slim her down, it completely destroyed her health. The cost was immense, physically wrecking her right before the biggest performance of her life. In this really cruel twist of fate, the very thing she did to try and secure her success pretty much guaranteed its failure. She was so weak from all her illnesses, her voice was barely audible. The star-studded audience, we're talking people like Sammy Davis Jr. and Mia Farrow, they noisily walked out. Caesar's Palace canceled her contract. It was a humiliating public disaster that sent her spiraling into a deep depression. In the years that followed, Cass did manage to rebuild her career with TV specials and regular appearances, but she continued her dangerous dieting habits and just ignored the really clear warning signs her body was giving her. And this timeline shows her final days in July 1974. She had just finished 2 weeks of sold-out shows in London, but after celebrating at Mick Jagger's birthday party, her friends started getting really concerned. As you can see, by day 2, she looked unwell and totally exhausted. She just brushed it off as exhaustion, but on the 3rd day, she was found lifeless in her room. Almost immediately, the rumor mill went into overdrive. The story that she choked on a ham sandwich was a vicious lie, a final, cruel smear that played right into her lifelong struggle with her weight. The truth, confirmed by the coroner, was that her heart had simply given out. So what is her real legacy, beyond all the myths and the mockery that defined so much of her life? Well, it's one of secrets, family, and an absolutely undeniable talent. Part of her legacy was this fierce devotion to her daughter, Owen. Cass protected her fiercely, and she never told anyone who her father was. It was a secret she took to her grave, a mystery that was finally solved years later by, of all people, her former bandmate, Michelle Phillips. But the ultimate testament to her talent, the real proof, is this. When the Mamas and the Papas were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the surviving members needed 3 professional backing singers to even try to replicate Cass's singular, powerful voice. And even then, they couldn't fill the void she left. And that's really the question at the heart of her legacy. Her voice just soared above constant judgment, heartbreak, and cruelty. It belonged to a woman who deserved to be remembered for her immense gifts. But instead, a cruel myth overshadowed the tragic truth. It wasn't a sandwich that killed Mama Cass. It was a world that couldn't see past her size to celebrate the giant talent within.